Smallpox, discovered over 3,000 years ago, has torn through many civilizations. After a smallpox outbreak devastated England, a vaccine was crafted that broke a medical barrier by being the first effective inoculation that eliminated the danger of smallpox. This vaccine was the most critical because it paved the way for more vaccines, saving innumerable lives. If not for the invention of the smallpox vaccine, epidemics like polio, yellow fever, and measles would still be claiming thousands of lives today, and there would be no hope of preventing COVID-19 in the future. When Native Americans were first exposed to smallpox by European explorers, it decimated the native populations. From 1519 to 1619, it is estimated that over 90% of pre-contact native populations in Mexico perished. As Inca civilization grew, therefore, the Spaniards used biological weapons more than military conquest when waging war on other empires, which caused the estimated amount of 95% of the population of Native Americans through North and South America to die an unpleasant death. Around 50% of Incas died from the smallpox disease. European explorers discreetly used smallpox as a weapon by giving the native populations blankets infected with smallpox. The disease also influenced war after native populations perished. Army Heritage quoted, "As early as 1775, George Washington knew smallpox was a serious problem for his army. Throughout the fall and into the winter of 1775, an outbreak raged in the city of Boston. Rumors abounded that the British were deliberately spreading the disease. When the British finally evacuated Boston in March 1776, only soldiers who had already had the disease were allowed into the city. Washington ordered his doctors to keep a sharp watch for smallpox and to send infected men to the isolation hospital immediately. The Civil War had its share of smallpox too. As National Museum of Civil War Medicine wrote, from May 1861 to June 1866, there were 12,236 reported cases of smallpox among white troops in the Union Army, or 5.5 per thousand men annually. In addition, there were 6,716 cases among the U.S. colored troops, or 36.6 per thousand men annually.
Edward Jenner created the vaccine by inoculating a child with cowpox pus, which then caused the child to fall ill with a mild case of cowpox. Cowpox is an infectious disease caused by touching the udders of an infected cow. Scabs are then collected from a smallpox patient and transferred to the child. This child is now unaffected. However, this was not the first time inoculation was used effectively, as it is aided by George Washington at Valley Forge, the idea brought on to him by African Americans. Washington suspected the only available recourse was inoculation, yet, contagion risks aside, he knew that mass inoculation put the entire army in a precarious position should the British hear of his plans. Moreover, historians estimate that less than a quarter of the Continental Army had ever had the virus. Inoculating the remaining 3/4 and every new recruit must have seemed daunting. Yet the high prevalence of disease among the Army regulars was a significant deterrent to desperately needed new recruits, and a dramatic reform was needed to allay their fears. As Discovery Education said, vaccination for smallpox was revolutionary because it represented the people's attempt to intervene into the disease process to prevent it up front. This is the first time a man-made product had been used actively to prevent disease before it occurred.
Before smallpox was eradicated, the disease claimed over 30% of its victims within 10 to 16 days after being diagnosed with the virus. After the vaccine was made, the death rate dropped to 12%. Creating the vaccine saved millions of lives. As the University of Oxford wrote, estimates are the range of around 5 million lives saved per year, which implies that from 1795 to 2018, around 1.1 billion lives have been saved. This vaccine was the most important because it paved the way for more vaccines to come. Among the new vaccines were polio, yellow fever, and measles. Polio, caused by the polio virus and transferred from person to person, was responsible for 60,000 deaths in year 1952. This disease was contained in 1955 when Jonas Salks invented the cure. Yellow fever is caused by the infection from a mosquito bite. Yellow fever, the cause of 30,000 deaths each year, was eradicated in 1910. Measles is caused by the infection from the rubeola virus and was guilty for 2.6 million deaths each year. The measles virus was defeated in 2000 by a vaccine program. All vaccines, serums, and injections branched off from the smallpox vaccine. The smallpox vaccine is the father of all vaccines, as it provided a system that doctors and medical personnel have used ever since Edward Jenner broke a barrier and made history. These horrible and terrifying diseases would not have been contained if not for the genius of Edward Jenner and his vaccine. As Edward Jenner wrote, "I hope that someday the practice of producing cowpox in human beings will spread over the world. When that day comes, there will be no more smallpox." The smallpox vaccine is the most important because of the billions of lives it saved and how it helped further grow the medical field and vaccines.
Shortly after the vaccine was made, the death rate dropped, which shows how effective the vaccine really was. In the 1900s, smallpox deaths had dropped rapidly to only 1,592 deaths each year. The years before accounted for over 5 million deaths. Edward Jenner once wrote, after the vaccine was made, "The joy I felt at the prospect before me of being the instrument destined to take away from the world one of the greatest calamities was so excessive that I sometimes found myself in a kind of reverie." Long after the vaccine was made, it still had a purpose as it was used in wars after. Governor Ridge, good afternoon. The President has just outlined the plan to strengthen the security of America by improving significantly our capability to protect Americans in the event of a smallpox attack. As he described the plan, the strategy for the country is to provide smallpox vaccine to our frontline troops, our emergency responders inside the country, and our armed forces and embassy personnel that serve in high-threat areas internationally.
The American family physician said over the next 150 years, smallpox vaccine became the most successful vaccine in history. We today would not have any vaccine for smallpox if not for Edward Jenner and his making of the smallpox vaccine. Vaccines all started with Edward Jenner and smallpox. Over the years, there have been countless more diseases that have been cured, and now currently we have the COVID-19 that is in a desperate need of a vaccine. As Rick Bright said, vaccines are essential to saving lives. Delivering a safe and effective vaccine for a rapidly spreading disease like COVID-19 requires accelerated action with parallel development streams. The rapid progress we are making with industry partners clearly demonstrates a commitment to protecting people at home and abroad. COVID-19 would not be able to be cured had it not been for Edward Jenner and his smallpox vaccine, as his discovery gave a recipe for scientists to use in making more vaccines for new viruses such as coronavirus. The smallpox vaccine created by Edward Jenner broke many barriers, one of which was that it was the very first vaccine ever. Another barrier that the vaccine broke was that it was the first ever working vaccine. By making the vaccine, Edward Jenner opened a whole new vision and perspective on the medicine and vaccines. The University of Stanford said, "The smallpox was always there, filling the churchyard with corpses, tormenting with constant fears all whom it had stricken, leaving on those whose lives it spared the hideous traces of its power." Therefore, the smallpox vaccine was the most important ever.